startups, entrepreneurship, starting your own new business. Join me every week as we dive into stories, topics, and advices from the top founders, innovators, the crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers. Every Saturday at 4 p.m. I'll see you there.
When assailed by an exogenous force, by an external force, like a shock of some sort, how long does it take for that system to return to the way it was before? That's the technical definition of resilience.
How do you see startups or businesses or universities actually accelerating this process of proximity?
These challenges have opened people's minds that there probably is a much better way, and it can't be a little bit better than the way it was before.
How can we actually have people start working on this project and accelerate it globally?
Great. The next morning, I got on my flight on Emirates Airlines to come back to New York, and the lettuce on my salad was picked at that plant the night before.
Wow. Hello, my name is SaadAhmedAllahwala, and today we are with Robert, who is a professor at two of the top business schools on the planet, which are both in Chicago, the University of Chicago and the Northwestern University.
Yeah, correct.
Awesome. Today I've got the honor to meet him for the first time at his house in New Jersey, and of course it's a beautiful experience so far. Thank you for hosting.
Well, welcome, and you've come a very long way to be here. So our home is your home, and hello to your father.
And of course, thanks to my father for introducing us. Again, it's been a blessing being his son because I get to meet so many interesting people all over the world. Robert's doing a lot of work in the innovation space, and his new book, Proximity, is also coming out very soon. He is an angel investor. That means he works with a lot of startups. He also is doing a lot more, which I would like to learn from him.
Right.
Because there's so much that you told me that it's pretty difficult to remember.
That's okay. There are kind of three spaces to my life, my professional life. One is I'm an adjunct professor of innovation at Kellogg and Booth. You mentioned both of them. And in that role, I teach a lot of exec ed and EMBA, so older students. They tend to be 30 to 55 years old, mid-career. And I love that because I learn so much from them. They're out there doing it, making decisions. They're on the hook to make things happen. And I really love working with those students. And that's about a third of my life. And then another third is my wife and I have invested in a lot of entrepreneurs, startups over the years. And that's a very exciting part of my life. But my research and teaching is focused on large established companies and governments and large nonprofits and complex organizations and how they try to innovate. And then the other third of my life would be the World Innovation Network, or Twin Global. So this is a community of innovation and growth leaders around the world, and we don't have a staff. We're not trying to build an empire. We just keep together, keep in touch, and go and reach out and do exciting things in the world. So within those three things, I will often speak or I write. You mentioned my book coming up, Proximity, which we can talk about. Advise a variety of clients one-on-one if they're trying to figure out how to innovate or invest or find foresight into the future. So Saad, I like to think of my purpose, my overarching purpose is I try to help people envision the future and find their places within it. So everything I do is somehow related to that purpose.
That's awesome. And if I actually ask you a very small question, would be, why is knowing the purpose of your future so important? Why can't we just wing it all of our lives?
Well, we're perfectly welcome to wing it. In fact, that's probably what life naturally foists upon us. If we don't take the intention to think about why we're doing what we're doing, things will happen anyway. And we'll be faced with decisions moment to moment, and hopefully we navigate through well. There are people who believe that the right way to live is to live in the moment and to take things as they occur. there's a great wisdom in that. But maybe it's partly my Western upbringing or my personality, I don't know. But I feel like even to excel at that kind of approach to life, that philosophy of life, having an overall purpose gives us a way to make better decisions on the fly as life happens to you. Because it's not that you're going to be in control of life. We should all just disavow ourselves of the notion that we're in control of anything.
Yeah.
Right? But when life poses challenges or questions to you in the moment, if you have a notion of an overall purpose, you can use that to help yourself, hopefully over time, make better decisions. So for instance, to illustrate, in my case, if someone comes to me and says, hey, would you be willing to help with X? Or would you be willing to invest in this thing, for instance? In addition to all the normal questions you'd ask, like, do I think it's a good investment? Do I trust the team, etc.? For me, it has to have something that's truly new or that could make the future potentially better. If it's something I'm going to spend my time and attention on, there has to be a role in some way that I'm helping people see the future in some way and then find their own places in it. So my teaching at Kellogg and Booth is all about that. Everything I'm doing I see as helping enable the students who come through the program to think more constructively about that. And then the companies we get involved with, the initiatives, whether they're big companies or entrepreneurs, I look for situations where I'm going to be doing that. Now, honestly, there are things that come along that look really fun and exciting, but they don't fit in that purpose. And I don't always say no, but it's easier to say no because I have a reason why I'm not going to do that really exciting thing, because every bit of attention we have comes at a cost.
Yes. Of course.
And so it helps me at least, and maybe it helps other people too. It helps me at least focus our limited attention on Earth.
And that's a beautiful way to summarize it. And a small activity that we do at even our own organization before hiring is we make people design a mind map for their life and just plan what they actually want to achieve in the next 20 or 30 years. So we as an organization can actually help them get to that goal better. Plus them having clarity of what they want in the next 20 years. So they're not doing something that's wasting their lives. And a reason why that's a norm is what we saw, and why my dad actually started the organization was that people, because they're stuck in their daily hustle and bustle just to pay their bills, just to pay their expenses, and not really having the mental capacity and time to think about what they want and what they actually plan. That's why it actually occurred and why my dad actually started his foundation.
Great.
You mentioned that you invest in startups.
Yeah.
What kind of investments do you do, and what is the main focus for you for companies?
So, like anybody who's investing in the future, you need a portfolio. Because anytime you face a lot of uncertainty, you better have a lot of portfolio, a lot of options. Now, options come at a cost, but I don't think any early stage investor who makes an investment in a company thinks, well, I'm not sure this is going to work out, but I'm going to give you the money anyway. Maybe there's a case here and there for other purposes, but you're thinking when you make that investment, this is a big opportunity, this is likely to work, right? But the reality, even for the very best early stage investors on the planet, the reality is that a lot of them will not work out. So you need to have a portfolio of options. So the way that I approach our portfolio is we have a bunch that are really early stage, before revenue. And I used to do more of those when I started this process in 2010, 2011.
Wow.
So it's been a while. And some of those have matured and done well, and some have been horrible failures, as you'd expect, right? But over the past 5 or 6 years, I've then I still do some of those, but I've started to shift more into what you would call Series B, approximately, ventures, where they have revenue, they have product market fit, they kind of know what they think they're doing. People are paying them for something, but maybe they haven't really scaled it up yet. They're looking for scaling capital. And the way I do that is I don't go out independently looking for those opportunities. I have a couple of funds that I've invested as an LP. I trust them. They have a great track record. They seem to know what they're doing. And I'm particularly interested in the application of digital for digital health and digital education. And so we've invested with a couple of funds that focus specifically on digital health and digital education. And that's been great because they bring opportunities that are sort of that middle stage where it's unlikely to be worth nothing in the future. Now the return might not be that 10 or 100 or 1,000x return you might hope for on one of those really early stage ventures. But still could be 3, 4, 5, X. So it's about building a portfolio of different kinds of opportunities with different risk levels over time, and doing your best to help those companies to succeed. So in some cases, I'll make an investment and then barely hear from them. Send them an email every quarter and say, "Hey, what the heck's going on?" And in other cases, I'm directly, actively involved. Maybe serve on the board or on the advisory board, for instance. So it varies, depends on the project. Some of the project I have a lot to offer and I can help a lot. And in others, maybe I'm just able to make some introductions or identify people they should talk to for certain skill sets or possible customers for their product, or that sort of thing. So it runs the gamut, but it's about building a diverse portfolio, focused with entrepreneurs. Number one factor, do I trust the people that are trying to build the business? And number two, do they seem to have something that could really make a big difference in the world? And the reason the people are more important than the idea itself, of course, is whatever you think you're going to be doing, if you're innovating, is not actually what you're going to be doing in 3 or 4 years. You're going to discover that what you thought you were going to do really needs to change. The opportunity is really over here. Is that team going to be resilient? Are they going to be able to pivot and evolve and adapt with new information? So that's how we approach investing at various stages in building the future.
That's awesome. And that's what I was going to ask you next. What do you look for in the company? But you already answered that.
Honestly, in the earliest stages, you can only do so much due diligence because they don't even have, in the earliest stages, they don't even have revenue yet. So they might not even know what their product is. They might think they know, but you never know until someone's actually paying you for stuff.
Correct.
Right? So in the earliest stages, you're saying, do I really like that Saad guy? Do I feel like I can trust him? Does he seem like he's in it for the long run? Those kinds of, you're investing in people more than anything else.
That's awesome. So your new book is called
Proximity.
I almost said Prospect.
No, that's okay. Why don't you take it again, because you can edit that out.
Oh, that's what I was going to do. So your new book is called Proximity. The word proximity, you described it and you explained to me what it means very beautifully. But I would generally think that a lot of more people would want a definition and an interpretation from your side of what actually proximity means.
Okay.
And then let's dive into more about the book.
Great. So obviously the word proximity has been around for centuries. And it generically, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means your proximity to something is how close or far you are from that. What we're using in our book, we use the word proximity to explain a phenomenon that is happening across every industry, right? And it's been happening for a while, and it's accelerating, and it's going to change every industry for the rest of our careers. And the reason this is digital technologies, and digital technologies writ large. So it could be artificial intelligence, it could be a mobile phone, or Internet of Things, but it could also be rooftop solar energy generation, or 3D printing. So you might not think of rooftop solar or 3D printing as digital, but they're both digitally enabled.
Yes.
We're able to do things with those capabilities that we could never have done before digital. So the reason that we're interested in digital in the first place was in 2014, I said, everybody's looking at all these technologies and trying to figure out what to do with AI, or trying to figure out what to do later with blockchain, or, all these digital technologies. But I said, there must be some common underlying dynamic that they drive in the economy that we can discern that could give us some foresight as to where the world might be going.
Right.
And what we realized quickly, and this first part is not shocking, but it's the implication of it that surprises most people. So the first part, everybody says, oh yeah, of course, right? The first part is the observation that digital allows us to compress capabilities in smaller and smaller packages, either physical packages or digital packages, electrons, and distribute them all over the economy, ever closer to every moment in time and space. So, for instance, an app on your mobile phone or AI somewhere in the cloud that's accessible literally anywhere, or a 3D printing piece of equipment where you can actually manufacture 1 or 2 or 30 copies of the product as opposed to 1 million copies in a manufacturing plant, right? So all of these are compression of capabilities in smaller and smaller packages all around the economy. And here's the punchline. As a result of that distributed, coordinated, connected nature, digital technologies push the production and provision of value, that's products, services, or experiences. Digital technologies push the production and provision of value ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space. Now, when I first started talking about this, and I think it was at an economist event in 2015, most people thought, oh yeah, I see he needs better supply chain management. And I okay, well, no, that's great. Better supply chain management's great. But that's an example of taking the new stuff and cramming it into the old model. In other words, how do we take the new technology and make what we have a little bit better? And that's a good exercise, but that's not enough. What we have to recognize is that digital technologies allow us to do things we could never have done before.
Right.
And that's where breakthroughs happen. And the breakthrough that we're seeing across industries right now, and it's only accelerated, especially since COVID, is that digital is allowing us to do more and more ever closer to the moment when there's an actual customer looking for a specific product. So I'll give you an example. In December last year, I was visiting Sharjah in the UAE, one of the Emirates, for the Entrepreneurship Festival, which was great, by the way, if you ever get a chance.
Wait, in September?
In December, the Sharjah Entrepreneurship.
Oh yes, I saw posts. I couldn't go.
Yeah, it's very good. It was very good. I think they might be doing it again this year. I'm not sure.
Definitely want to go.
So while I was there, I had the opportunity to go visit the largest vertical farm operating in the world.
Really?
In Dubai. And it's with a company called Bustanica. It's a partnership between Emirates Airlines and Crop One.
Huh.
So Crop One is a vertical farming, distributed farming company. So I went to this facility near the Dubai airport, and they were growing leafy greens and herbs and other things. And I was trying the lettuce product, essentially. Exceptionally good. As good as anything you'd get at a French farmer's market. Now, no offense to French farmers, but I mean, it was really good, right? Oh. But here's the punchline, Saad. The next morning, I got on my flight on Emirates Airlines to come back to New York. And the lettuce on in my salad was picked at that plant the night before.
Wow.
So now compare the economics, compare the supply chain, the sustainability. Now, energy is a separate issue. The key to distributed agriculture is distributed electricity, distributed power, distributed energy. That will unlock distributed agriculture. So set that aside, because that has not been solved yet.
Yes, of course.
But compare the model of my lettuce coming from a facility a few miles away from the airport to the current model, which is you grow lettuce somewhere in North Africa or in Spain.
Even Pakistan, it goes from...
You put it on a ship, you send it to Dubai, you put it in a warehouse, and maybe your lettuce is a couple weeks old by the time it's in your store.
Yeah, it is.
Right? The economics are completely, utterly different. There's a very good friend of mine, one of my heroes named Dr. Jeffrey Ling, who was a military doctor. He practices medicine at Johns Hopkins now. And during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they kept running out of drugs in the hospitals. Of course, they're in a war zone, right? But what most people don't know, Saad, is we have generic drug shortages in hospitals and clinics all over the United States right now.
Right.
And I'm sure you do in Pakistan and
of course.
all over the world. And Dr. Ling said, this is ridiculous. Why can't I just make the drugs I want right here, right now? If I had the right equipment and the right ingredients, I could do that. And so he came back to the US. He got a big grant from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, where they invest in crazy stuff. Big stuff. It became the internet, for instance.
Wow.
It came from DARPA. But also telekinesis. They've invested into it. It hasn't worked yet. But later this century, by the way, it will work. It will work later this century.
Damn.
So he came back, he got a grant, he worked with a team at MIT, and they created a piece of equipment that today, right now, you can do this. It's approved for military use, and they're going through FDA trials to be approved for civilian use. It's a piece of equipment the size of a small refrigerator.
No way.
And you can, if you want 300 doses of ciprofloxacin, the antibiotic, you type in ciprofloxacin, 300 doses, and a few hours later, you've got 300 doses of ciprofloxacin produced right there on site.
Oh my God.
Exactly the same as you get in the pharmacy.
Oh my God.
If you want 1,000 doses of atropine, type in atropine, 1,000 doses, a few hours later, 1,000 doses of atropine.
Oh my
Now, here's the exciting part. In addition to bringing pharmaceuticals to the places where they're needed anywhere in the world, here's the really exciting part. We all know that pharmaceuticals have shelf life. And a shelf life means the amount of time before you have to throw it out and make new pills, right? The US government, I'm sure Pakistan does as well, has a stockpile of ciprofloxacin in case of a public health emergency. And every 2 or 3 years, they have to throw out all the drugs and make new ones.
No.
So there's a lot of waste, right? With Dr. Ling's solution, which is called on-demand pharmaceuticals, the ingredients in that equipment that makes the drugs are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, there are some intermediates, and ignore those for right now.
Wait, so no other chemicals are needed?
There are intermediate products for making pharma,
Sorry.
which they cover in this thing. But to simplify the discussion, all of these generic drugs are just, they're organic, so they're made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So in this piece of equipment, for instance, is carbon. That's one of the things. What's the shelf life of carbon? Forever. So compare the sustainability and the economics of having that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen sitting in a box waiting for you to tell it exactly what you want, to having to make millions of copies of all the different kinds of drugs you might possibly need and having them distributed all over the world waiting for someone to need it.
Wow.
And throwing most of it out. That's proximity. And that's coming not just for physical products, it's coming, as we mentioned before, with AI, ChatGPT, proximity. I throw in a query, and minutes later, I've got an essay. Now, it might not be the essay I want. It's my job to make sure it's saying what I want it to say, how I want it to say. But talk about immediate productivity as a result of your need or your demand. And it's happening coterminous and co-located with that specific demand. That's proximity.
That's fantastic. That's a lot to take in. But it's also extremely interesting of how everything, it's a new way to think about things.
It is. It's a new paradigm.
It's a new paradigm.
And that's why we wrote the book, because in the book we talk about proximity in general. And then we've broken the chapters into chapters that reflect how we live our lives.
Okay.
So how we eat, how we work, how we power, like electricity, for instance, how we create and produce, how we invent and design and create and then manufacture and distribute, how we prevent and cure, and then how we defend. And in the final chapter, we talk about virtual reality and space. And part of the reason, Saad, we know that everything is going toward proximity is that the two new human worlds of the 21st century are virtual reality or metaverses and space.
Right.
And both of those are quintessentially proximate. Why is that? As virtual reality gets better and better over the rest of our lives, eventually the headphones and the goggles will go away. We won't have to be encumbered by those. As the experiences become more comprehensive, more realistic in the feeling of that experience, more and more things will be creatable and experienceable anywhere at any moment. simply limited by electrons, electricity, and the technology and access. And then in space, we have a number of members of the World Innovation Network, or TWIN, who are somehow related to space. One of them runs a grant program for NASA. She's a professor at Baylor in Texas. And she runs a grant program for NASA for space health. So how do we help humans stay in space for months or years? And when I was telling her about proximity, her name is Dorit Denovial, Professor Denovial. When I was telling her about proximity, she said, Rob, everything in space has to be proximate.
Right.
All the work we're doing to try and help humans go to Mars is to figure out proximate solutions for everything they'll need for that 8-month voyage to Mars. And then the couple of years as colonists on this distant land. So she said, once you're in the spaceship, if you forgot your toothpaste, you can't call Amazon. So whatever you've got in that spaceship is all you've got.
Right.
So all of the development and effort going to figure out how to get humans into space is driving toward proximity.
Wow.
So anyway, we break it into these various areas, and then we look at the implications of proximity in each of these industries and each of these realms of our lives. So to give you, for me, one of the most compelling examples is in healthcare. This is partly a personal story because my father, Bob Wolcott, died somewhat early at the age of 63. He had an aortal aneurysm. And just a few months before, he'd had a complete physical, totally clean bill of health. I would like to think that today he would still be alive. If we had the technology we have soon, if he had had that at the time, he'd still be alive. And what do I mean? Well, always on health monitoring of all of your vital signs and everything. We have the Oura Ring and we have the Apple Watch.
Right.
But imagine 10 years from now. It could be 5 years, could be 20. The time doesn't matter. But in the not distant future, we'll have the ability to monitor every vital sign, every system in your body on an ongoing real-time basis. And so what this will do is that with artificial intelligence, data analytics, et cetera, we'll be able to unlock weak signals that there's a problem coming, or that there might be an issue. And it'll say, hey, Saad, you know what? You need to go to the doctor and get this taken care of. Or you don't need to go to the doctor at all. We're going to send you something to help resolve this problem. And so what this means is proximity, that always on monitoring, wherever you are, it's always on and it's monitoring you. That proximity in healthcare pushes healthcare from curing things to preventing things. Why is that? Because we get to discover there's a problem way before it's even a problem.
Right.
As opposed to, I don't feel well, I'm going to go to the doctor, and then I discover I have pancreatic cancer and it's already stage 3, which is not atypical.
That's right.
So in the future, we'll be able to catch those kinds of things far earlier. And so proximity pushes healthcare from curing to preventing.
So of course, there's, I think, endless possibilities in the space of healthcare and also all kinds of other spaces. But how do you see startups or businesses or universities actually accelerating this process of proximity?
Right.
And equally around the world, because it's not only a US problem that we need food somewhere or we need electricity somewhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, even renewables, I still find it extremely funny that it's easier for me to get solar panels on the top of my house in Karachi than compared to the US. And
that is changing, thankfully, but
I still don't know why. But I see more solar panels in Pakistan when I've driven over 15,000 miles.
Keep in mind, and I'm glad to hear that you're seeing a lot of solar panels there, but keep in mind that there was a greater need for it. So in the US, people have relied for so many decades on the electricity grid, and in most parts of the US, it works pretty well. It has its issues, it fails sometimes, but for the most part, people take it for granted.
Yes.
And if you take that for granted, you're less likely to go out and install panels.
I guess.
That's changing.
I guess. And yes, you're right, because then the reason why we even got solar panels and the massive amount of batteries on our house was that we would need backup electricity. We couldn't rely on the grid.
Right.
On the plus side, though, we don't pay any electricity bills.
Yeah.
And people are getting bills for $500 even in Karachi, where we're giving zero to the government.
And that's distributed energy generation.
Correct.
You're generating that electricity right at the site you're using it. Now, you might also sell some of it back to the grid, like in the US and parts of Europe.
Oh, we do.
And you do as well in Pakistan, great. But that power is being generated right there where you're likely to use it.
Of course.
And then if you have a microgrid, of course, then maybe your neighbor can use some of it. Or maybe it goes to the overall grid system. It depends on where you are.
Yeah.
But so your question, I think, Saad, was how do universities or
how can we actually have people start working on this project and accelerate it globally?
Great. Well, a few thoughts. First of all, they need to know what's happening.
Yes.
The number one objective and one of my mission objectives for the next year is the book launches in March. It's from Columbia University, Columbia Business School Publishing, so Columbia University Press. It's launching in March, and I need to find as many ways like this podcast to tell people about this idea. When I'm finding that since COVID, because COVID was such a catalyst for so many experiences, it changed the way people looked at things like working remotely, for instance. Also, the brittleness of our global supply chain, the challenges that so many industries had with semiconductors and energy and all these other factors. These challenges have opened people's minds that there probably is a much better way, and it can't be a little bit better than the way it was before. So the first step is my co-author, Kaihan Krippendorf, who, by the way, he's an American, but he's half German and half Bangladeshi.
Wow.
And Kaihan and I are launching this book in March, and our first job is to get as many people to hear the story and understand what this proximity thing is, because it is very different than the way we've thought about industries in the past. And as far as we can tell, no one else has really sort of figured out how dramatic this change is becoming. But they're starting to get it because they're seeing it with things like ChatGPT. They're seeing it with things like distributed energy all over the country and all over the world. So that's the first step. The second step is once they hear the story and they understand how profoundly different this future will be, that it is happening, whether they like it or not, whether they're going to be part of it. The second step is that I would love them to think about what does it mean for them? So what does it mean for each of us as citizens,
right,
as consumers, as human beings? What does it mean for our businesses? If I'm an entrepreneur and I'm trying to build a new business, how do I manifest proximity and lead this trend as opposed to being behind? If I'm an established company, how do I take the things I'm already doing and say, if in 5 years or 10 years, this can be produced and provided, co-located with the customer, how might my industry look different than it looks today? And by having that foresight, you can develop business models and concepts and pilots and other things to drive that trend as opposed to being behind. So I'd say those are two. And on the policy side, there's never been more receptivity to trying to figure out how to improve the resilience of countries and regions, cities, etc.
Right.
But I would point out that we know what people mean when they say they want greater resilience, but from a scientific perspective, that's not really what they mean. And in the science of complexity theory, which is I'm aware of, I'm a big fan of, I'm not a complexity theorist. But when we were first starting to develop the concept of proximity, I contacted a friend of mine, David Krakauer, who's CEO of the Santa Fe Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this is the epicenter of complexity research worldwide. And Krakauer, who's an evolutionary geneticist, he explained to me, he said, Rob, in complexity theory, resilience has a specific definition. The resiliency of a system is essentially defined by how long does it take for that system, when assailed by an exogenous force, by an external force, like a shock of some sort, how long does it take for that system to return to the way it was before? That's the technical definition of resilience. But that's not really what we mean when we say we want more resilient society, supply chain, etc. What we really mean is adaptability or evolvability. So what we're really looking for are resilience and evolvability, or resilience and adaptability. And so proximity brings far greater adaptability. Why is that? Because capabilities are distributed all over the place. And then if this one node has a problem, these nodes over here take over and solve the problem. And this was actually the fundamental insight that led to the internet originally. Because the challenge that the developers were facing, it was in the 1960s, the Department of Defense said, we need to figure out how, if there's a nuclear attack, we need to figure out how we can still have communications operating all over the country, even if a large percentage of the country has been destroyed by a nuclear attack. So how do we do that? So what they realized was they needed a system where all the nodes were connected and distributed. So if 30% of the nodes were destroyed, the system continued to operate and would find different paths. This is packet switching, right? TCP/IP, different paths to its intended recipient. That's an example of proximity, distributed capabilities anywhere. And this is one of the things that helped us lead to the public internet. So what does this mean for policymakers? You're probably aware, maybe it was 15 years ago, that the government of Bangladesh made a proclamation that by, I think it was 2024, it could have been 25, I'm not sure. By 2024, the country would have enough electricity generation capacity to serve the whole country. Because they had shortages, they had blackouts, right. They had brownouts, they had parts of the country that weren't covered by the grid, right? Weren't serviced by the grid. And so they said, we're going to build enough electricity generation capacity to serve the needs of the entire country and into the future by 2024, I think. And guess what? They did it.
Really?
Last year, they achieved their objective of generating and having generation capacity in Bangladesh to do that. The problem is it didn't solve the problem. Why didn't it solve the problem? Because what they focused on was the old 20th century solution, which is we're going to build big electricity generation plants, power plants, and we're going to build enough power plants to have a certain number of kilowatt hours that we need to serve the country. But the problem is that wasn't actually the right problem to solve. Having enough generation of power is not the right problem to solve. What you need is accessible power all over the country wherever people need it.
Right.
And that's a completely different challenge. And so, meanwhile, they built all these power plants, and big congratulations to the government for achieving it. It was a big objective and a big success. But it failed to hit the actual objective, which is to provide electricity to everybody in the country, right?
So why did they fail?
They didn't sufficiently upgrade the grid. But also, here's even more important than this. They could have encouraged, in addition to building power plants, because they definitely needed more power plants, but they could have, in parallel, also encouraged solar installations. They did a little bit of it, but the government was focused on building power plants. Now, meanwhile, as you mentioned in Pakistan, communities, families, people's homes, businesses, they kept having problems with electricity. So naturally, they'd say, well, can we put up some solar panels and get some battery backup? And we have a twin and good friend in Bangladesh has a company called Rahimafrooz, and they were founded years ago. I think his father or grandfather founded Rahimafrooz to make car batteries. And so years ago, he saw that this solar panel thing was happening. He said, we need to get into that business, and we're going to also make battery backup systems. So Rahimafrooz and other companies as well started offering solar panels and battery backups all over the country. So these things percolated. They started popping up around Bangladesh, and they helped. So people that have access to those have greater reliability of their power. They're more resilient through shocks to the system. But this is the thing, it's a very small percentage of the country. Now, what if instead the government had said, instead of saying we're going to build enough capacity to generate power the old way, what if they said, we're going to build more power generation capacity, because we need that too, but we're also going to, in parallel, encourage solar power and battery backups? Well, what would they would have ended up with a far more resilient and adaptable energy system in the country. they probably would have come a lot closer to solving their overall energy problem. And this is what we call the hybrid solution. Centralized traditional generation, which you still need, and distributed energy like wind and solar all over the country with battery backups. This is where the world's going to have a much more resilient and adaptable energy system. Traditional, centralized, and distributed proximate power. So there are significant public policy discussions going on right now where people need to recognize how profound this proximity trend is. And they need to think about supply chains, manufacturing as they reshore, as they move plants to different parts of the world. Simply building the old 20th century massive manufacturing plant, in some cases is the right idea, but in other cases will be a big waste of money and resources. Right. So and once we know proximity is there, how do we turn that into better public policy, better business strategy, better investment opportunities to build the future?
Just to get a little more clarity,
yeah.
Proximity would be similar to when we use the term of decentralization or circular economy.
So decentralization is one of the factors that allows us to have proximity.
Right.
So decentralization itself is not the objective, usually. I mean, it's something we want to do in order to achieve something else. Like I mentioned in the internet, part of being decentralized was to achieve an alternative, a different objective, which is to have a communication system that can survive a nuclear threat, a nuclear attack. So the distributed nature of digital technologies is one of the things that enables proximity. The objective of proximity, the objective of business, the objective of governments, etc., should be to serve people. It should be to help make people's lives better, to satisfy their needs and wants. And so what proximity says is we're going to build systems that are ever closer to every demand that any customer, any human being might have, and be able to produce and provide that efficiently right there on site.
So decentralized would more be a process rather than
the decentralized aspect is one of the things that allows us to have proximity.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And proximity can also be in shape of circular economy.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, again, using the pharmaceutical example, if I can produce only what people want, I can dramatically decrease waste. I can also figure out how to use some of the latent resources that are already out there more efficiently. This would be related to circular economy for sure. I can figure out how to, in a distributed manner, reuse and recycle and fix the things that are in the environment that are latent in new ways. I can't remember what I was going to say, so you can edit that out. But I'll give you an example. An industry that's important in Pakistan is textiles.
Yes.
Right? So for developed countries, and I know the dynamics are a little different in developing countries, but for the industry in developing countries, the whole industry of garments is predicated on waste of about 30% of the annual production. So give or take, about 30% of the garments produced in the world every year are thrown out into a landfill or incinerated,
yes,
or whatever we do with them, right? Now, I can't imagine many industries that can actually make money when a third of the things that they're producing are going to waste. I mean, imagine the automobile industry if they said, all right, Saad, those 30,000 vehicles over there, if you could just throw them off a cliff because we're going to make money from these 70,000 over here. I mean, it makes no sense.
Right.
It makes no sense. But that's how garment industry is currently set up. Around 30%, depending on the kinds of garments and the locations in the world, but roughly
so
around 30%.
After being used or before?
No. They produce, no one wants to buy it, and they give them away or they throw them out every year. And again, the dynamics are a little different in developing countries, but certainly serving wealthier developed countries, we waste a lot.
Yes.
To try and satisfy the whims of consumers at any moment. What if you had opportunities to only produce the garments that people want when and where they want them? The closer you can get to that, the more and more of that waste you can eliminate.
And products like 3D printers or, well, 3D printer being shaped and designed to print in so many kinds of aspects now. I mean, we can make concrete structures, we can make plastic structures, we can make metal.
Yep.
Also, so I saw someone printing with cells. There was a TED talk with printing a heart or a kidney, was it?
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's real.
I had the privilege late last year to visit Dean Kamen and his group in Vermont. And or is he in New Hampshire? You know what? You're gonna have to edit that out. Yeah, you're gonna have to edit that out. I had the privilege to visit Dean Kamen and his group. He's the inventor of the Segway, but he's the inventor of 1,000 other things that many of which you probably use, some of which you use on a daily basis. And they are right now working on systems in order to be able to create custom organs for specific patients, for instance. And others have done this, but they're figuring out how do we build that into a repeatable system that's efficient, so that if Rob needs a certain organ, we take his cells and we turn those cells into the liver that he needs. And this is very well documented. This is where things are going. That's an example of proximity, because now I can have, when Dean Kamen and his team succeed, or others succeed at doing this, we can have these small footprint production facilities around the world. And then when there's a specific patient that needs a liver or a kidney, those cells can be converted into that organ and provided specifically for that patient when and where it's needed. Now, there's a lot of development that still has to happen, but that's the direction that it's going. There's a lot of development with 3D printing in general that still needs to happen.
Right.
For most things, it's not economical yet. For most applications.
But
there are some where it's very economical, and what happens, like any disruptive technology, it gets better and better over time, and eventually it transforms the industry.
Right, and we saw that with AI also. That it was we heard AI for so long.
Yeah, people are like, what is
but
data analytics?
Right, but all of a sudden, when ChatGPT comes out and it's for free available, everyone actually starts to get a hint of it, and then the conversation gets started. That okay, what kind of policies we need to make.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to actually give you a book, and you can edit this. So I'm going to hand you. I'm going to give you a book during the podcast. And I'll be right back, because there's a quick story to tell about it.
Awesome. Let me stop it, and then we can start again.
You should edit this such that so all of a sudden a book appears on my lap, right? So that's okay. No, you'll edit it later, right? So Saad, first of all, thank you for making the trip through North America and coming all the way out here to New Jersey. I know you're staying in Manhattan, and one of the things you need to know about New Yorkers is they don't come to New Jersey unless they live here or have to go to Newark Airport.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you move from Manhattan for a peaceful life, or?
No. We lived in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago, where Northwestern University is. And what happened was, when COVID hit, I traveled a lot, and then, like all of us, I wasn't traveling at all. And so I was in my home office every day for months, and I said to Ada, my wife, I've been in Chicago area since 1976.
Oh my God.
I want to change.
Is that when you were born?
So we moved. We looked a whole bunch of places in the country during COVID, and for a variety of reasons, we decided that Ridgewood, New Jersey would be great. And it's because we both have a lot of family in the area, New York and New Jersey. Newark Airport, if you fly United, takes everywhere nonstop. It's the best airport in the country for nonstops overseas. And you're an example of another reason we moved here. When your friends from overseas, and we have a lot of friends around the world, when they come to the United States for other things, they go to New York.
Yeah.
They don't go to Chicago or Denver or New Orleans, they go to New York. So we see people every 2 or 3 weeks who are visiting from somewhere in the world. So, Saad, thank you so much for making the trip all the way out here to Ridgewood, New Jersey from Manhattan. But as a token of thanks, and also to maybe extend our conversation a bit beyond this, I self-produced a book called Foresight with a friend and colleague, Moran Cerf. So Moran is a very well-known neuroscientist, and he and I started thinking about the far future back in 2015, 16, and we started to work on a project that we're calling Post-Virtual. I had to put Post-Virtual on hold in order to get proximity out the door. So we put Post-Virtual on hold so that I could focus with Kaihan Krippendorf on getting the book Proximity done. That's done, it'll be out in March. So Mohan and I are gonna come back around to this project next year. But the Post-Virtual project is, we're trying to understand later this century, when we get to the point, when we get to the post-virtual world, how will we transition to and through into that new space? So what do we mean by post-virtual?
Yeah, that's
great. It has a very specific definition. We define post-virtual is after the point where you cannot experientially tell that you're in a virtual world. We're in the post-virtual world. When you cannot, just by experience, tell that you're in a virtual environment, then we're in the post-virtual world. Why is that? Well, because after that point, no one will ask a stupid question, like, should we meet in a real cafe or a virtual cafe? Because that won't make any sense. They'll be like, what are you talking about, right? Then we'll be in the post-virtual world. So the thought experiment or the philosophical experiment we were doing, and we're picking it back up actually now, is how might life change as a result of our transition into post-virtual world? And then how do we as human beings and societies navigate that? How do we, what are even the philosophical foundations of thinking about life in the post-virtual environment? So the reason I bring that up is in 2017, we produced this sort of small art book called Foresight. And it was really a pilot, a trial balloon. This book includes a number of essays that were posted in other places like Forbes or New Philosopher, a few other publications, and a couple written for this about various aspects of the future. So there's one article in here about proximity from a number of years ago, but there are two articles about post-virtual. And there's also one about what will humans be able to do better than AI in the future? And the answer...
That's a very important question.
Well, the answer that we came to was nothing. Nothing. And we could argue about that another time, but you can read the article. What will remain uniquely human in an age of artificial intelligence? And we assert nothing.
We might as well send artificial intelligence to Mars so that we don't even...
Actually, there's great insight in that, because if you send an artificial intelligence, let's say robotic, they don't have all the encumbrances that we have. We don't have to figure out how to keep them alive, right? Yeah. They don't have to breathe air. They need resources and they need electrons.
Which is easily produced.
Yes, exactly. But it's free. It's called the sun.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a few other things in here that this was again in 2016, 17 when we did this. There's an article about a concept I came up with called proxy AI. So proxy AI is an AI system that takes all of your digital detritus, all your postings, all your everything you've done, maybe things you've written, but also potentially things people have written about you. And it can create a proxy of you through AI, or a proxy of William Shakespeare.
My father's doing that right now.
Yeah, a lot of people are now. There's one where you can talk to Jesus Christ. Well, that's dangerous because, first of all, it's not really Jesus Christ, right? Second, who's to decide what Jesus Christ would say, or what the Buddha would say, right? Who's to decide? In any case, that's called proxy AI, and there's a short article in here about it. But the punchline is a friend of mine in the AI space emailed me a few months ago, and he said, by the way, I just looked up proxy.ai because he was thinking we should buy the URL. Microsoft owns the URL.
Oh my God, you could have made so much money.
Well, maybe, but I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't smart enough to buy the URL. Not at all. And I'd love any thoughts you have about it. And certainly if you come back to the US, you come back to New York, you're always welcome here. And we love having visitors. So, and to your father too, if you or Rayhan are here, you're welcome to stay with us.
I would love for him to come here again. I don't know when he's planning, or mainly because you know how I was asking you, like, what's the drawback of someone not planning too far forward and just winging it all the time?
Yeah.
My father would be one to winging it all the time.
But your father has
with
a
a great
great sense. Your father has a great sense of purpose. Your
Yes.
father has a great sense of, I need to support people in the world to do the great things that they aspire to do. I don't know Rayhan that well, but that's something that I believe that probably some part of his mission is to support other people to do the things they aspire to do.
Yes, it is. And I would love to host you in Pakistan whenever you're close to
I can't wait. I've never been to Pakistan. I've been many times to India. I've been a few times to Bangladesh, never to Pakistan. So if there's a purpose, and
I will find a purpose for you to come.
Find a purpose, I will come and visit you in Karachi.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for hosting.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Great.
Startups, entrepreneurship, starting your own new business. Join me every week as we dive into stories, topics, and advices from the top founders, innovators, the crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers. Every Saturday at 4 p.m. I'll see you there.